Hello everyone. In this lecture, we will discuss about UN Sustainable Development Goals for Sustainable Development. So you may have seen these actually color patches already. These are total 17 in number, and they actually have been given these color codes, and they have been given a dedicated number like 1, 2, 3, 4 up to like 17. They have actually representative graphic, for all of these 17 like SDGs, and they come in like this spectrum. They come in this color combination you can see over here, and they form actually a complete circle. So in itself it gives this notion, this idea of completeness, having a complete and a sensible actually sustainable system, by incorporating, by actually addressing all of these actually concerns. And majorly, if you see in today's world, there are like three aspects of sustainability that we have already studied: environmental, social, and economical. And under these, there are like several types of like issues. For example, there are issues of like a poverty, hunger, a fresh supply of like a water, a fresh supply of like a air, a roofing, maybe the place of like a respectable place of like a habitation, a play like a opportunity for like a education, opportunity for like a health services, sanitation, opportunity for like a growth and development, to be part of the the entire actually mainstream of the society, the science and technological like advancement. So there are actually all these sorts of like concerns. Wherever there are like any sorts of concerns on ESG aspects, those are actually somewhere they have found a mention in all of these 17 actually SDGs. So these 17 SDGs are the most comprehensive sets of like a sustainable development goals, which are actually capable of serving the smaller and bigger objectives of like a sustainability and in and around it, like on the ESG aspects. So we will discuss these actually goals in detail in the like coming slides. So if you see over here, so these, for example, the first one starts with the no poverty. So of course a huge number of like a population from like mostly like most of the like countries, mainly in the like Asian countries, African and the Latin American countries, is still like fighting for like a good actually life. So those are the people who actually can be considered as like the poor people. And there is actually a line you may have heard of, like a below poverty line, BPL. So there is a significant actually number of population which still lives below actually that BPL. And the our all of this actual growth and development and the advancement doesn't make any sense if the humanity at large is not able to feed or take care of its own like a species, its own like brothers and sisters from across like the world. All of this growth and development makes like no sense. So the first and foremost actually is the like eradication of the poverty, because of the poverty there are all sorts of like other issues also arise. And for example, the family of that person, they may not be able to afford actually good food. He may not be actually able to fend for like a his like a daily survival. He may not be able to provide actually clothes for the family or himself. He may not be able to actually give the opportunity of like a education or even like a basic things like a health services. So actually this poverty is very very bad, very detrimental, and it's like a traumatic actually a situation for the entire humanity to think upon, and actually work for like a improvement of the like a conditions of is like a sizable number of like our own like a number of like people. And then the second is like a zero hunger. So one must actually strive to feed, at least be able to feed like a himself, herself, or the family members. So this zero hunger comes like the second this is also one of the most important actually areas where a significant improvement is needed. We are all aware of there are still like a number of like a people who are like a very like a weak in on the like a economical actually terms, and they actually find it very hard to receive actually meals like at least 2 meals per day. So actually one should actually never die actually because of this hunger. So there are actually several schemes started by like international agencies, particularly our the central government and state governments, to feed actually these many people. So there should be actually consistent and a permanent actually solution for such situation. So by solving actually the first one, we may be able to solve the second one also, and that is where actually they are interrelated. So these two have actually found the prominent place, because as a civilization, as the human species, we cannot say we have evolved unless we are not able to solve these two actually, the foremost actually and the prime requirement of being just alive on this planet. Okay, third one is to take care of the good health and well-being. The fourth one talks about quality education, gender equality, clean water and sanitation. So you can see on the top, these are all a very basic human requirements of living in a good condition, working in a good condition, at least getting to receive a respectable a knowledge and education, so that one can actually empower himself and herself for a future, for the livelihood, for actually working and our professional lives. Well, gender equalities, this issue also has been persistently there in several of the countries. You may be aware the fairer gender has not even been given with the voting powers till recently in many of the countries. They do not have actually the rights to drive vehicles alone. They do not have rights to go to the restaurants or public places alone. So such actually things are very detrimental for us as humans. Some of the religions and cultures actually, they follow a very actually pessimistic actually approach towards the fairer gender, and they are not they cannot be actually called just. So in the recent times, some of the state governments and center, our own Indian central government has actually taken steps to abolish actually those demeaning actually practices from the older times, from the ancient times, and move on to the new actually era of advancement and equality. So this is one of the actually important actually factors over here, and that is why it has found a place in the UN SDGs. Further, a clean water and sanitation, well, this is also one of the most basic actually necessities. Unless we do not drink clean water, there are chances that the person may actually catch several diseases and other issues. So there are several, you may be aware already, there are several types of diseases which arise just out of the a bad or the not fit for the consumption water. So these waterborne diseases must be actually solved by first of all providing the fresh water and potable water and the quality water which is hygienic and clean, etc. Moving on, we have this seventh one, affordable and clean energy. Then we have decent work and economic growth. Then we have industry, innovation and infrastructure, reduced inequalities. We have sustainable cities and communities. We have responsible consumption and production. So in this range, if you see these from 7 to 12th, we have actually focus on a clean energy system. We have a focus on the justified actually and equalized actually economic growth model. We have innovation, and we have emphasis on on infrastructure. We have again talked about abolishing inequalities in the society, inequalities in the community. We have actually talking about the sustainable cities and sustainable communities. We are talking about consumption and responsible actually production system. So these are all have to do a lot with all the aspects of a sustainability, whether it is environmental, social or economical, for better future. Further, we have very a top level actually approaches regarding the climate action. We have a concern, we have shown some concern for a life below water. Our several there are thousands and millions of species living in the water bodies, whether it is a small as a lake, or maybe a river, maybe oceans. So we must actually take care of these beings also. We must actually take care of the living beings who are living on the land, birds, animals and other life forms. And then we have actually 16 point of peace, justice and strong institutions. Then finally we have partnerships for the goal. Well, nothing we can do in alone or in isolation. We must actually fight all of these goals, all of these challenges actually together, because in the company, in the unity, there is a force, if somebody has a certain advantage, if some other person has certain advantages, if they are both come together, they can have the actually multiplication of that the both a distinct advantages, and that is how the society can actually grow manifold. in the recent times, actually when the globalization process has actually begun, so there is a support happening on the exchange of like economic, social, community and educational and research activities also. There is so much of exchange happening at the world level. The companies and institutions are actually collaborating. The governments are also promoting like a collaboration between the like research and academic institutions, collaboration between the like companies for like a monetary as well as like a technology, like exchanges, etc., and all that. So all of these actually things, if they come together, all of the stakeholders, if they come together, so all of these is sustainable developments are not that hard to actually achieve. So further, what is the like the goal? What is the actually vision about this thing regarding the first actually SDG which we have spoken of? So envision like 2030. By 2030, eradicate extreme poverty of all people everywhere, currently measured as people living on less than $1.25 per day. So this is actually a target which has been set by these United Nations to achieve actually this target in the next like by the year of like a 2030, so that every like a person living on this planet must actually be able to earn a livelihood of like $1.25 per day, so that he can at least live a minimum actually standard like of life. By 2030, reduce at least by half the proportion of men, women, and children of all ages living in poverty in all its dimensions according to national definitions. Next, implement nationally appropriate social protection systems and measures of for all including floors, and by 2030 achieve substantial coverage of the poor and the vulnerable. Further, by 2030, ensure that all men and women, in particular the poor and the vulnerable, have equal rights in economic resources as well as access to basic services, ownership and control over land and other forms of thirteen property, like inheritance, natural resources, appropriate new technology and financial services, including like microfinance. So this talks about sharing of like resources. It talks about sharing of the property. It talks about actually sharing of the like new technology, sharing of the financial services, including like microfinance systems, etc. So it talks about actually sharing opportunities of actually growth and development in the individual's life, in the life of the household, which is very important and crucial for the overall growth which they can observe over the period of time. Further, by 2030, build the resilience of the poor and those in vulnerable situations and reduce their exposure and vulnerability to climate related extreme events and other economic, social and environmental shocks and disasters. So this talks about actually the effects which could be actually possible through these degradation in these ESE aspects. So one actually must take care of those vulnerable actually situations or the criticalities which may arise. So we must actually work to create actually a resilient model of development, so that actually we can take care of ourselves in those actually extreme situations. Further, next point is like ensure significant mobilization of resources from a variety of sources, including through enhanced developed cooperation in order to provide adequate and predictable means for developing countries, in particular least developed countries, to implement programs and policies to end poverty in all its dimensions. Further, create sound policy frameworks at the national, regional, and international levels based on pro-poor and gender-sensitive development strategies to support accelerated investment in property eradication actions. So if you see this goal actually talks about a wholesome actually approach, ranging from like a national, regional and local levels, ranging from like a gender sensitive actually issues, ranging from like a poverty eradication issues and etc. And accordingly actually the agencies and the governments can actually frame actionable points. Next to this, you can see in this actually graphic over here, this talks about ending poverty and hunger for all persons with disabilities. So particularly this is talking about the people with their disabilities. So there are like these two SDGs you can see over here. Those are actually displayed over here. So these are the first and two, ending like a poverty and ending actually hunger. So this is actually specific actually focus for the, like people with disabilities, because they are actually a group of people who are like a more prone, they are more vulnerable to actually both of these actually conditions. because they are not actually physically fit enough for meeting like a several requirements as we have in the everyday life. So they must be actually, this actually group of people must be actually receiving some special actually attention, so that they can not fall actually prey to these two actually situations. So there are actually conventions and actually undertaken on this actually objectives. So the convention on the rights and persons with the disabilities, so the article 12 actually talks about right to control actually financial affairs and equal access to bank loans, mortgages and other forms of financial credits. So these set of people are also equally deserving for such financial helps and assistances available from financial institutions. Article 27 talks about opportunity to gain a living by work freely chosen or accepted. Article 28 talks about right to social protection and access to poverty reduction programs. So in this one you can see there are actually conventions placed in the a provision, so that these actually section is not actually left out. Up to twice as many persons with disabilities live under the poverty line than persons without disabilities. So, well, this is the reason why this focus is given particularly to this set of people. In some countries, persons with the disabilities find that 30% of banks are not accessible to them. So this is one of the actually limitations, one of the actually challenges, additional challenges they face, by being a disabled person, being a especially able person, they do not actually get the equal access to such services. Further, if you see, in some countries, over 80% of persons with disabilities who need welfare services cannot receive them. Okay, so these are the actually indicators from our like a society, from our different countries, okay, which gives a glimpse how vulnerable, how prone actually this group is on actually these two considerations. So the actions needed to end a poverty and hunger for all persons with disabilities, so design or redesign social protection policies and programs to include persons with disabilities, remove barriers that persons with disabilities face in accessing and benefiting from social protection on an equal basis with others, sensitize personnel of grant offices about barriers experienced by persons with disabilities, improve access to and accessibility of banking and other financial services, disaggregate data on poverty and hunger by disability status, and periodically access all social protection programs regarding inclusion and impact. So these are the actually action points actually recommended by United Nations, particularly for these this group of people, to actually solve these two actually sustainable development goals. We will see next about a zero hunger. So what are the points in the Envision 2030? By 2030, end hunger and ensure access by all people, in particular the poor and the people in vulnerable situations, including infants, to safe, nutritious, and sufficient food all year round. By 2030, end all forms of malnutrition, including achieving by 2025 the internationally agreed targets on stunting and wasting in children under 5 years of age, and address the nutritional needs of adolescent girls, pregnant and lactating women, and other persons. By 2030, double the agricultural productivity and income of small-scale food producers, in particular women, indigenous people, family farmers, pastoralists and fishers, and including through secure and equal access to land, other productive resources and inputs, knowledge, financial services, markets, and opportunities for value addition and non-farm employment. Further, by 2030, ensure sustainable food production systems and implement resilient agricultural practices that increase productivity and production, that help maintain ecosystems, that strengthen capacity for adaptation to climate change, extreme weather, drought, flooding, and other disasters, and that progressively improve land and soil quality. Further, by 2020, maintain the genetic diversity of seeds, cultivated plants, and farmed and domesticated animals and their related wild species, including through soundly managed and diversified seed and plant banks at the national, regional, and international levels, and promote access to and fair and equitable share of benefits arising from the utilization of genetic resources and associated traditional knowledge as internationally agreed. increased investment, including through enhanced international cooperation in rural infrastructure, agricultural research and extension services, technology development, and plant and livestock gene banks in order to enhance agricultural productive capacity in developing countries, in particular least developed countries, correct and prevent trade restrictions and distortions in the world agricultural markets, including through the parallel elimination of all forms of agricultural export subsidies and all export measures with equivalent effects in accordance with the mandate of the Doha Development Round. Further, adopt measures to ensure that proper functioning of food commodity markets and their derivatives, and facilitate timely access to market information, including on food reserves, in order to help limit extreme food price volatility. So these are actually action points decided to deal with the like a zero hunger United Nations Sustainable Development Goal. Further, we can see over here some actually situation for this actually particular group, ensuring healthy lives and well-being for all persons with disabilities. So we have actually we can see over here the convention which is like taken care of, like Article 25 talks about the access to free and affordable health services for persons with disabilities on an equal basis with others. Removal of discriminating barriers that prevent full access to healthcare services. Other articles highlight enhanced participation in the labor market, in the economic, community and political life which impact a person's health. So we can see over here there are considerable number of actually provisions made in the by the law to prevent actually the unequal actually opportunities faced by actually this group of people. Further, when we talk about in this actually area, so we have actually on the like a quality education. Also, there are actually some convention made like access to inclusive, quality, and free primary and secondary education on an equal basis with others. Further to this, this talks about on the like convention on the rights of the persons and disabilities. If you see, Article 25 talks about provide persons with disabilities with the same range, quality, and standard of free or affordable sexual and reproductive health care and programs as provided to the other persons. Further in this series, you can see like Article 28 talks about ensure equal access by persons with disabilities to clean water services, ensure access to appropriate and affordable services, devices, and other assistance for disability-related needs. In this series only, the Article 27 talks about right to work on an equal basis with others, right to the opportunity to gain a living by work freely chosen or accepted. Next in this line, this talks about actually the sustainable development goal like a 10. It talks about like equalized opportunities. So the person from like this actually section also must be given with the equalized opportunities. Next in line, this talks about Convention on the Rights of the person with disabilities. On the like Article 19, it talks about right of all persons with disabilities to live in the community with choices equal to others. Article 28 talks about right of all persons with disabilities to an adequate standard of living and social protection. So in a like overall sense, if you see, the sustainable development goals are actually giving us some some targets actually, and targets are actually such like a subsector. We can break them into like several objectives and actionable points, and we can try achieving them in a given or like a specific time. We can go back and review again if there are like additional corrective measures needed. We can go back and implement them, and we can actually try actually achieving that goal in the given time. So this talks about over here like a disability sensitive educational facilities, provide accessible like a transport system, provide like accessible like a public and green spaces. If we see like for the like persons with the disabilities, 52% of schools are still not having like a wheelchair accessibility, and 61% of government websites are also not accessible to these sorts of like people, for example, who are like a blind. Okay, or you cannot like hear, you cannot like see things. Okay, so this is the kind of limitations they are actually experiencing. So there should be like a wholesome effort each and everywhere to actually minimize such like inconveniences to this actually a section of people. In this particular slide, it's a dense slide, you can see over here. This talks about all like indicators, there are actually 232 SDG indicators, and what sorts of like a data are like available. So you can see this green actually talks about indicators for which recent global official metrics are available. This yellow one talks about indicators that do have official metrics but for which available data is very incomplete or outdated, and the red ones are the actually data sets to the best of our knowledge the global monitoring is not actually currently possible. So you can see over here, like for the like a no poverty, if we see over here for the extreme poverty, well, the data is available, but the moment we see about secure land rights, okay, so the enough data is not available to evaluate actually these things. Social protection, basic services, disaster deaths, disaster like costs, so these for these actually assessments and evaluations ample data is available, but for like actually evaluating like a national poverty actually lines, or these things, so limited or restricted actually amount of data is available. Similarly, you can see among all of these 17 actually SDGs, you can see like the availability of data. So why this actually this data set is important over here, like in the absence of the data itself, how the corrective actions or how the corrective measures can be taken up. So this data collection, this information gathering is very important, is very critical actually for the success of these UN SDGs. So one actually the countries and the mechanisms must actually work to first of all gather this data so that the corrective measures can be taken up. So I would like to talk about here about this clean water and sanitation. This is actually a graphic to promote actually such thing, and what are the actually challenges in this actually particular area, and what are the solutions, what are the tentative solutions. So it's a graphic actually given by United Nations like an environment program. So you can see over here in the challenges, so the challenges are in terms of like the unsafe water, any inadequate solution and insufficient hygiene. It kills around 3.5 million people every year. That's a huge number. 35 lakh people are killed by like there's just unsafe water. Next scenario, if you see, 80% of wastewater is released is released the environment in the environment like untreated. It degrades the environment, and it destroys the nature's ability to provide safe drinking water. So the 80% of wastewater released is actually untreated, is unsafe, and it's toxic. On the water scarcity front, if you see, the water scarcity affects more than 40% of the global population. So that means 40% of the global population, 40 out of like 100 people are actually having some kind of challenge in just accessing the water. So this is the scenario. So for like these challenges, what are the tentative solutions? So let's see on the right side. Stop dumping chemicals, waste into the environment, invest in sanitation, and raise awareness on the like a best hygiene practices. Well, some actually solutions are very simple. Some of the solutions are very actually behavior and like a action based, like for example adopting like a hygienic practices and means, raising actually awareness. One should be actually conscious of not consuming or not actually taking actually water from the like a bad sources. I can see, as you can see over here in this left graphic, okay, these people actually sourcing from actually a spoiled place of like a there's a spoiled source of like a water. So one must not actually consume actually water from these places. So and most of this water actually has gone actually bad because of the like a sewage discharge, because of actually the chemical effluents, the factory discharges, several other types of like the pollutions. So if we stop actually poisoning our water, simply our water resource will get cleaned. In the next scenario, if you see, the protect natural resources and avoid water pollution, of course the point which I was talking about. Finally, like restore ecosystem to secure access to the like a safe water. So at the once the ecosystem is in like in the balanced position, because water bodies, they have actually natural tendency of actually cleaning themselves. Okay, so if you just leave them like that for like a period of time, so the rivers, these lakes, and they actually claim even the oceans, they have this their own like resilient actually capacity to heal themselves. So one actually must not actually keep polluting them, or keep actually leaving actually discharge in these water bodies. So these solutions are not very rocket science, they are not very complicated to understand and difficult to like a grasp, but this should actually must actually go into our like a practices. Finally, this chart I would like to explain over here. I think we have seen it earlier also, like a cumulative emissions of CO2 and future like a non-CO2 radiative like a forcing determine the probability of limiting warming to 1.5 like degrees like a centigrade temperature. So we are like aware like our world is experiencing this global warming phenomena, and that's because of the tremendous amount of like exhaust and the pollution and the other impacts, in several like forms, and a lot of like emissions of like a greenhouse gases in the atmosphere and all that. And as a result, the world's temperature, average temperature, is observed, it's rising, and it's further going to increase in the like next like a decades, if we do not stop, and if we do not actually behave like reasonably and sustainably. So this is the kind of a range given over here, which talks about the kind of repercussions it may actually pose to us if it is like not stopped. But if it stops, it of course it has the potential to actually bring back to the it's like a normal position, as you can see in this the lower chart at the over here. Let me move on, because we have seen enough on this actually sorts of like a data. But let's more talk about the UN SDGs only. Here if you see, this chart shows about indicative linkages between mitigation options and sustainable development using like these SDGs. So here actually for this entire actually these 17 SDGs, it talks about the trade-offs and synergies which are possible. So you can see these color codes over here. It talks about like how much is possible, how much is like the kind of a connection it can actually establish. So you can see the from this legend, the lengthier the this bar, the deeper the connection is, and with the shades of these color over here, it shows the confidence level. So we can see over here in the like a no poverty, actually this SDG, the confidence lower level is lower, which is not a good sign. But in the synergies, well, the confidence level is high, and it can actually improve itself. Similarly, you can see over here in the energy demand, the confidence level is at the medium level, but the synergy level, there is a portion of like the a high confidence level also. Okay, similarly, if you see in the quality education, well, it seems there is no data available in many of these actually SDGs, but some of these SDGs, they have actually a higher confidence actually of like a recovery. As you can see over here in the clean water and sanitation, we are seeing a deeper level of confidence over here, and the length of connection also is high over here. But some of the others like this decent work and economic growth over here, a very like a small length, that means a smaller actually connection is possible. So this gives actually an indicative idea about the existing actually mitigation actually plan, and the linkages between these like developmental like activities. Further, moving on to this next slide, how this warming actually is happening. So we are all aware, some of these are actually some of the locations in the like a global map we can see, which are actually experiencing very high actually temperatures. They are actually experiencing more actually on this like overall like a warming actually part. So these are the regions. India also unfortunately is one of the regions where a significant warming over the like a last few years is like observed. So you can see in this scale over here, this talks about range from like a zero point 0.1 degree Celsius to like up to like a 2.5 over here. So some of the like a portions in the India over here, and some of the portions in the like a China over here, and some of the portions in the Europe, and like northern America are experiencing actually temperature rises in this actually in this range. Next to this, again how this global mean surface temperature is rising. So there is some actually model given on this actually explanation. So on this slide, we can see this sustainable development implications of alternative mitigation choices for 1.5 degrees centigrade, like a pathway. So the pathways which United Nations is actually has proposed. So it has actually some reflections from these 17 like UN SDGs that we can see over here on this particular table. So this actually slide the legend. I think we will go with these legends first. So this green actually cell talks about the potential synergies with the SDG achievement. So there is actually a potential actually synergy which is possible with the achievement of actually these many SDGs, which you can see over here in this green, this dark green color, and in the red color with the minus actually indication, you can see there is a risk of actually trade-off with the SDG achievement. In the yellow color, if you see with the plus minus, it has both the risk of the trade-off as well as the potential for the synergy also. And in the white ones, well, they are either neutral or not directly related or not directly affected. With the intensity of the color, you can see over here, the lightest intensity talks about the low confidence, the medium one talks about the medium confidence, and then the dark intensity, the darkometric value of this color talks about the high confidence. Similarly, you can see over here, these are actually 17 SDGs listed over here. So based on the demand, supply, and the requirement of the lands, we can see the kind of synergies, the potential synergies which are possible in which of these UN SDGs, and the kind of risks, where are the risks involved in which of these actually implication areas, and in which of these SDGs. So there is actually a correlation we can understand from here, like which are the actually still some risk areas or the potential areas where a significant actually amount of like work is actually needed, a significant amount of efforts are actually needed. So this gives actually detailed idea. So maybe I would advise all of you to actually find actually this actually document from the internet. Okay, this is freely available for accessing, and you can go through this in detail for your understanding. So this slide actually talks about Sustainable Development Report 2019. So this is taken from this source. Maybe you can search for this source. This report is also available freely online for a referencing. So I would like to discuss some of the aspects which I found interesting and valid for our discussion, our today's discussion in this class. So these are actually 6 SDG transformations underpinned by the principles of leaving no one behind and circularity and decoupling. So these are the actually 6 SDG transformation actually areas, transformation actually domains which are actually targeted, so that there is no one left actually in the whole this process of growth and development in the recent times. So those are, if you see, the first one is education, gender and inequality. It actually touches the sustainable development goals of 1, 5, 7 to 10, 12 to 15 and 17. The second one, this transformation is in the health, well-being and demography. The third one in the energy, decarbonization and sustainable industry. The fourth one in the sustainable food, land, water and oceans. The fifth one, sustainable cities and communities. The further a digital revolution for sustainable development. So these are the actually 6 transformations actually possible, because with this it is likely that there won't be anyone left behind in this whole process of growth and development. Further, we can understand actually what is circularity and decoupling over here. So in the first actually head, education, gender and equality, it involving ministries of education, science and technology, gender equality and family affairs. This transformation covers investment in education, early childhood development, primary and secondary education, vocational training and higher education, social protection systems and labor standards and R&D. It directly targets SDGs 1, 2, 4, 5, 8, 9 and 10 and reinforces other SDGs outcomes. So as you can see, the focus is directly on the education, primarily education, gender equality, and removing actually inequality in the society. The second one actually talks about health, well-being and demography. Groups interventions to ensure universal health coverage like UHC, promote health behaviors and address social determinants of health and well-being. It directly targets SDGs 2, 3 and 5 with strong synergies into many other goals. Implementation will need to be led by the ministries of health. So it is directly actually advising, directly it is recommending which are those specific ministries which should actually take up actually such challenges as the like actionable points. The third one talks about energy decarbonization and sustainable industry. This transformation groups investments in energy access, the decarbonization of power, transport, buildings, and industry, and curbing industrial pollution. It directly targets SDGs 3, 6, 7, 9, 11 to 15 and reinforces several other goals. Implementation will require coordination across a large number of industries, including energy, transport, buildings, and environments. So the sectors and the targets are actually clearly like defined where to actually hit, where to actually go for the action. The fourth one talks about a sustainable food, land, water, and oceans. So in this one, we can see interventions to make food and other agriculture or forest production systems more productive and resilient to climate change must be coordinated with efforts to conserve and restore biodiversity and to promote healthy diets alongside major reduction in food waste and losses. Important trade-offs exist between these interventions. So we recommend identifying and addressing them inside one transformation, which will need to mobilize a broad range of ministries such as agriculture, forestry, environment, natural resources, and health. This broad transformation directly promotes SDGs 2, 3, 6, and 12 to 15. Many other SDGs are reinforced by these investments. Further, we see like the fifth one, sustainable cities and communities. Cities, towns, and other communities require integrated investments in infrastructure, urban services, as well as resilience to climate change. These interventions target, of course, SDGs 11, and they do also like contribute directly to goals 6, 9, and 11. Indirectly, virtually all SDGs are supported by this transformation, which relies on leadership from the ministries of transport, urban development, and water resources. The sixth and last one it talks about harnessing the digital revolution for sustainable development. If managed well, digital technologies such as like artificial intelligence and modern communication technologies can make major contributions towards virtually all SDGs. So in this slide, you can see this talks about a comparative assessment of government strategies and policy actions for climate mitigation. So in this one, you can see which are those countries who are actually putting up significant actually efforts, and which are those countries who are not putting actually desired like a kind of resources and inputs. So yeah, see these currently like insufficient, critically insufficient. So these dark color actually countries, for example, United States of America, Federation of like Russia, some other countries from like Europe and these Gulf region. So these are the countries which are actually highly responsible, the big emitters in the like recent times, including like China, and they are not actually putting significant or the like critical, and the situation is really critical for actually these, because they are kept into the critically insufficient actually category. And then these red ones you can see over here like Chile and this country, and the Canada and the China over here, and the South Africa, and in Indonesia. I think these are the countries under like a highly insufficient actually category. Well, you can see some improvement in these countries which are still in the insufficient, such as like Brazil, Mexico, and Australia over here. Ukraine and most of these like European countries, they are all under like a insufficient actually. So most of, if you see like most of these countries, these are the actually developed countries who are the having like either they are in the developed category, or they're developing very fast. They have actually a huge volume of GDP. They have the actually huge volume of like emissions, but still they are not putting up like a significant actually efforts for the like overall actually like a climate change mitigation and the meeting the like United nations like a sustainable development goals. So well, 2 degrees actually comparable if you see like the countries. So India is one of those actually countries which is following actually this lead, and this is a country which is kept in the category where which is complying on the like a controlled actually increase in the like average temperature of the globe right now. but the rest of the countries we are seeing in this dark color red and this orange color, they are severely in a, like a bad actually area. They are severely actually in the lacking in the efforts, for this improvement in the like a sustainable manner. Well, on this actually map, I see only one or two countries over here which are having this lighter green, so they are compatible with 1.5 degrees actually target goal, which established in the Paris Agreement. But I do not see any country in the dark actually green color which is catered as the like a role model country. Well, currently there is no country which can be called as a like a role model, at least whatever what I can see on this actually map over here. So there is actually a tremendous opportunity for the countries actually to follow the lead and move from actually this side of this graph towards the right side, towards the like a more greener side. So here if we see this actually graph talks about average spillover score against like a gross domestic product per capita in purchasing power parity. So here if you see on the like a x dimension, we have a like this GDP per capita in purchasing power parity constant, like this from the year like a 2000 like a 10. So this is given in the US dollars. So starting from like a $0 up to like a $1,20,000. Okay, so the countries are actually divided on this actually scale for like a per capita actually purchasing power. And on the y dimension, if you see, this is elaborating on the average of spillover effects, like a 0 being the worst one and 100 being the best. So 100 means at the bottom only here on this scale. So if you observe the country of India itself, like our own country, is doing actually relatively much better, and it's I think touching this bottom line of like 100. Okay, it may not be exactly 100, but I think it's close to around like 95 or even like maybe on 99 or something like that. Okay, maybe very close to like 100. Okay, on the like a spillover effect, so that means like India is not actually exerting like a spillover effect, though it is not doing very good on this parameter also. And the per capita actually purchasing power is relatively is far lower compared to the other countries which we see over here. Like the Qatar is actually topping this list. Okay, and the per capita income in the Qatar is the highest in the world correct now, with according to this actually graph, and followed by Luxembourg, Singapore, and then Ireland, United Arab Emirates, Kuwait, Norway, Switzerland. Then comes the United States and several other like European countries, like Germany and Australia is there, United Kingdom is there, France is here, Italy, Japan, Korea, Saudi Arabia, and these ones. And these are actually countries, if you see like this group, so they are actually in the like tending towards the worst category also. These Switzerland, Singapore, Luxembourg, United Arab Emirates, United States, United Kingdom, and so these many actually countries are responsible for the this mess also. So that is the actually overall actually outcome from this particular slide. So further is in this continuation, we have actually this slide which talks about the overall performance from like a country's like a perspective. So I have taken this example of Bhutan and India. So particularly Bhutan right now, on the index score, it has actually achieved like 67.6 points. On the regional average score, it has received like 65.7 points. And you can see on the like this rows actually diagram of like a 17 like a SDGs, how much it is kind of like a average performance it is like a giving in each of these. So this distribution is given over here. In the next slide, it talks about the current assessment of like a Bhutan as a country on this like a SDG dashboard. So we can see the SDG trends. So in this one, okay, first of all, let me give you the hint about this the legends. So this the red actually arrow which is pointing like a bottomward, it talks about like whether the efforts are actually decreasing. So there is very least effort, or rather the effort is in the minus. And with the orange and the lateral actually this arrow which is pointing like a forward, so it says about like the stagnation. The effort is neither increasing nor decreasing. With the yellow, this 45 degrees to the like this actually arrow is pointing to the, like that in the like upward direction with the 45 degrees like this angle. So this is talking about the moderately improving a situation, and with this green upward arrow we can understand like this is on the track or maintaining actually the SDG achievement. So we can see over here on this particular table in the context of Bhutan, there is only one actually SDG like of like a climate action where there is like this green arrow marked. That means Bhutan is actually maintaining actually its pace on maintaining this climate action. Rest of the others, either there is like a lack of the data, they are left actually with the dots. Otherwise they are actually moderately improving, or in some cases they are stagnating. But since there is like insufficient data on these many actually SDGs, so it is very difficult to conclude from here. But anyways, we'll move on to the India. So on this slide you can see the overall performance of India as a unit country, how it is performing on the index score. So this has scored like 61.1, and on the regional average score it has scored 65.7. So on the global like SDG rank, India is at the level of like a 115 out of 162 countries. This is a rose diagram where here you can see the average performance by each SDG group. In the next slide, so this one talks about this same, like how is it like a trending. So we can see at least 3 green arrows over here. So these are the on the like a no poverty front, and this 8th one is the decent work and economic growth, and the 13th one is the climate action. So we can see at least like a positive, at least a satisfactory actually trending pattern in these 3 actually SDG points. And we see actually 4 arrows which are we can say as like a moderately improving, and we can see at least 5 arrows with the stagnation mark, and we see actually one mark which is decreasing, which shows that like a significant actually effort are actually needed in this one. This is about life on land. So that means this actually SDG is not properly being addressed by India currently. So this is an actually the most critical actually opportunity area which we must actually work on. Well, more detailed actually observations are given in this particular table. So the performance by like indicators, so you can see like the value, rating and the trends are given for like each of these indicators in detail over here. Well, this particular data is available okay on the internet, so you can refer this data, you can browse it, maybe you can download it for your reference and your understanding which are those areas where like there is some significant improvement, and which are those areas which are like a critical and require like one of the like best efforts to improve actually. And yeah, so this is the end of our this lecture. So thank you everyone.